Hello, everyone. This is Lieutenant Colonel J. Arnold Clammon, retired United States Air Force, 33 years in the military, 28 years civil service, enjoying the life. Today, we are interviewing a good friend of mine, Colonel Eric Jenkins, who is also retired. But since I've given you an introduction of who your name is, tell all of our listeners who you are and what you do, sir.
How you doing? My name is Eric. It's a 30-plus year veteran of the United States Air Force and Air Force Reserve. Currently work for American Airlines as a 737 instructor pilot. Been there 25 years, so it's been a pretty good experience for me.
All right. Well, thank you for your introduction there, Eric. Let's dive right into these questions here. First question I have for you is, during your time on the line, and I understand your line being a pilot in the military is a different perspective than what my version of the line was, because I was maintenance and throughout my whole career. So I saw the line from a maintainer's point of view. But during your time on the line, what is your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway is how you leverage people. Over the years, I've seen a lot of things, and then most of the times when we had problems, we didn't know how to leverage people, or we didn't set in a buy-in. We didn't give our folks to buy into what we were doing. So I think we could have avoided a lot of problems had we learned how to leverage our folks. A lot of it's because every year or two you get a new commander and they
Right.
come in with their own perspective. Just like now at work, we've got a new set of folks doing some of our scheduling. And instead of just sitting back and watching what's going on and then attacking the problem, they're just going in, attacking a problem that may not exist, or they think they see the problem, but that's really not the problem. So as a result of them trying to fix something, they're going to cause another problem that they did not foresee. And then they'll probably, instead of asking, they'll react again and react as opposed to asking.
Right. Yeah, in the military world, as officers, as we move up in rank, we also move to new positions. And one of the things that I tried to do as a new commander coming in someplace new was to, like you said, sit back and observe for a time period to see how things were running and see if what I have in my toolbox could affect or change what was going on to improve. And I always tried to improve where I was at and make it better when I left. And I know when you were there as our commander at Seymour, you certainly did that when you came in with your perspective and your thought process. And it was, when you left, there was a vacuum there that the next commander came in, had a hard time filling. But your time on station there, even though it was brief, had a big impact on the unit. And it was something that we very much appreciated and could appreciate your time in service there with us. And me personally, I greatly benefited from your insight and your aspect on how you viewed people and how you viewed our worth and what we could bring to the game. And for that, I was truly grateful. For your next question, during your time, and you may have already mentioned this, but what is your biggest regret?
My regret is mainly, and you kind of just said it, right? One of my jobs was to help train the follow-on commander, and I probably should have been a little bit more forceful in that. Or even though he saw things, he still came in with his perspective.
Right.
And his idea was, and again, this goes to the broader issue. His idea is, oh no, you just tell them And I used to say, no, you convince them. Because if I can convince you, then you will go on your own and get it done versus me trying to micromanage you. Yeah,
Right,
it may go back to something one of our commanders calls. I'd said, hey, uh, if you see me come around asking questions, it's not that I'm trying to get in your chili. I just want to know what's in the chili, right?
right,
And
right,
then hopefully from there I can get some insight of what you need to get your job done. And I think your organization, y'all just needed, I think, a little bit of communication. Other organizations, and y'all weren't, the maintenance side wasn't a big deal because you had a good functioning area. You know who the biggest issue that I saw at Seymour was the medical side. We lagged in our metrics. We were like close to the
right,
bottom. And when we brought in the medical folks, they honestly thought when I brought them in, they kind of thought I was just going to rail them. Instead, I came in, hey, what do you need? It's game day. Unlike you and I on the maintenance and the air crew side, every UTA for them was game day when they had to do medicals and all that.
right,
Where us, we just did training. It was game day for them. And at the end, I kind of thought, well, here's where the problems are. And then the doc, and I forgive me, I forgot his name right now. Uh, he kind of sat back when I finished talking. He says, "Hey, I honestly came in here to get railed on. I never anticipated you asking me, uh, how can I get resources to help his problem?"
right,
Which his problem was our problem, right? Because if he couldn't get our folks through, your guys couldn't deploy, or none of the other organizations could
right,
deploy or work on their problems once they came back from a deployment. And we came up with a plan, and it was a cooperative plan versus a one-way plan. So to go back
right.
to my regret, I've always told my follow on that, hey, you got to convince him. And he still had his ways of doing it.
Hmm.
And it worked for active duty, but doesn't work necessarily for us as a reserve organization because we
Right.
come from a different perspective, right? Different ages. That's another thing.
Hmm.
Although he hit the ground running as a commander from the other places he came, he didn't understand that the reserve and guard component, just a different perspective.
Right.
And just because your perspective may be correct, was not correct for us at Seymour.
Right. Right. Yeah, it was a total game changer when the new commander came in there to the medical field, and when we actually got the reserve commander in as a reservist there, it certainly turned things around with your help and get things done. And the stats took several years to improve, but they finally came back up. It was probably a year or so after you had left. The stats finally came back up into where the reserves were expecting them to be within for our size organization. And it took a little while to happen, but it happened.
Right.
So within your career, what would you say was your greatest achievement?
Oh, by far, being at Seymour, being the commander there at Seymour, huge for me because that's something I never anticipated doing. If it wasn't for one of your former guys, Colonel Brian S. Davis there,
Mm-hmm.
I was going to be happy over at Tinker doing my deal. So for me to get offered the job and then General Johnson, the African commander, at the time, I do a personal interview with him. I mean, there's a lot of people who could have got that job,
Right.
and for them to choose me was a huge deal for me. So that's why I felt incumbent that when I got to you is not to serve myself. Hopefully, I served the Seymour.
You did. And like I said earlier, there were a lot of people who greatly benefited from your time there at Seymour as a commander, and being there as a reservist was with a reserve mindset toward the organization was just phenomenal in how the organization ran. And there were a lot of people that really respected your point of view and respected your thought process and your comments when you made them, because you're the type of commander, as you stated, sits back and listens and chose his words very, very judiciously, and was not the one to shoot from the hip, but was more methodical in his thought process. And when you commented, people respected what you said, and that is huge, especially coming from a reserve commander who's there 1 weekend a month, so to speak. And so that was greatly enhanced with while you were there, and people really enjoyed it. If you could title your story of your career, what would the title of your career be, or the title of your story?
I'll probably say unlikely. You know, grew up on the southeast side of DC, and then eventually moved to the Maryland side of that southeast section. You know, a little knucklehead there. Mom's a secretary. My mom was divorced years ago, so I basically grew up with my mom and grandmother, and then lots of other extended family who lived nearby. For me to say I would join the Air Force and become a pilot, and then go on to do some other things, like now, be the commander of a wing in the Air Force, be an instructor now for American Airlines, doing my job. I would have to say unlikely, you know. And it's
Unlikely.
there.
That's a good title for your story. Knowing your excuse me, knowing your background now and where you came from, and the type of I'm sure it was a rough life as a young man there in the DC area in Maryland, and with a single mom and stuff. Yeah, I'm sure it was a very rough life, and growing up. And so yeah, that would be a good title to your story. And my wife just chimed in and said, "Be a great title for your story."
Tell her I said hi, please. Yeah.
I will do that, sir. But so folks, this has been a short but sweet interview with former commander of mine, Colonel Eric Jenkins, who is retired from the Air Force but continues to serve this country as a pilot instructor with American Airlines out of Dallas. Sir, I want to thank you for your time today, and look forward to watching us on YouTube starting in September. All of these episodes will be posting. So again, thank you, sir, for your time, and we will end this discussion here.